today we're talking about self-nourishment and how that's related to boundaries. And this kind of came about because Joy and myself had a conversation about self-nourishment and how that actually differs from self-care. Mm-hmm. Self-care tends to be that to-do list that we think that we feel like we kind of drag ourselves to, like, okay, well, I need to slow down and stop. And self-nourishment is more of a practice and a ritual that ends up sustaining you in the long term. It's something that you change in your mind to realize that you can't live without. So if self-nourishment is what we're talking about and how to kind of achieve that, then boundaries are a natural part of that conversation. And I've had separate conversations with our wonderful friends here, Jovanie and Joy, separate conversations about self-nourishment and boundaries. So I wanted to bring us all together to just talk about it together and have a conversation and kind of hear you guys dig deeper, because I think you have a lot of wisdom to offer at the places that you have arrived right now. So today I just want to pick your brain about what exactly you do, why you do it, and what boundaries look like for you. Before we get started, I would love to tell people a little bit more about you and what you do. So this is my favorite. Jovanie is what you would call a vibrant vibe. This is the most true thing that I have ever heard. She is the director of global programs for InterVarsity, where she can lead leaders and students in understanding international programs, cultural awareness, and leadership. Her passion is investing in the next generation, self-care and self-love. They are so lucky to have you, my top talent, and they are so lucky to have you. So Joy works in the mental health field, practicing marriage and family therapy, as well as working for the Bay Ridge, Brooklyn Salvation Army Corps. She longs to provide teaching, counseling, and hope to those of us experiencing brokenness. Joe, so I'll start with you. How are self-nourishment and boundaries interconnected? And tell me just a little bit more about how self-nourishment like manifests for you.
Yeah, I for me, self-nourishment and boundaries have come very quickly for me within my life. I find myself in a lot of situations where people either press a button and I'm like, nope, and I immediately like I'm just like, nope, we don't want to do this. Or I'm always just like thinking ahead of like, I don't want to feel like this. I've never felt like this, but I'm sure it may come out to that feeling and I don't want to be there. I think, self-nourishment and boundaries is not a bad thing. And I really want people to understand that. I think when we hear these two words and them coming together, there's an immediate like, boundaries, but there's a beauty in it of where it really shows it protect you and you're caring for yourself. You're not pushing yourself to a limit that you just don't have. You're not pushing yourself to a capacity that you haven't even accounted for. And it helps you to really setting boundaries and also caring for yourself and in a way of rhythm, right? There's something about like what you said earlier today about self-care, the differences of that being a like checking off like, yes, I need to do this. Yes, this is self-care, but it has to be a rhythm. It has to be a day-to-day, almost like breathing. It has to be almost like breath work for you. Just like, yep, in the morning, I'm like slow, like I want to take things slow. You're going to brush your teeth. You're going to get ready. Like there's a way, it's a rhythm and a routine as opposed to a check mark, or the fact that you get to a place where you're so stressed out. Now you got 10 things you need to do to get your body where it needs to be. But more so just like, no, this is necessary for me, just as food is necessary for me to sustain, just as much as like breathing is necessary for me. Caring for myself, creating boundaries, not only for myself, but it also helps the people around me. Because I cannot imagine if I did not have boundaries. Wow, my family would be in shambles. I could not imagine. So yeah, it's very much holding two pieces very loosely and being open to what that looks like in your own life.
Yeah, that's great. Joy, what about you? And can you speak to if you can have self-nourishment without boundaries?
I my honest answer is no. I mean, I like that was like such a when you said that, I was like, no, you can't. Because I think that the majority of us have things twisted. And it's a bit crooked. Because sorry, let me back up a step. I think self-nourishment enables us to value what's most important to us. And it helps us to understand and know what we like about ourselves and what we love about ourselves. And it gives us like the motivation to maintain our values, whatever those values are. I'm gonna be a good mom. I'm gonna be a good wife. Whatever those are. I'm gonna be a good roommate. I'm gonna be, healthy. Whatever they are. Like I get. That's my self-nourishment. So my self-nourishment sort of supports all of that and holds all that up. And when I have bad boundaries, or when I don't have boundaries, all of my values seem to fly out the window because I'm caring more about what other people think. I'm caring more about what other people value. I'm more interested in somebody else's approval than approval of myself. I'm more interested in making others happy than I am about doing the things that really fill me up and give me joy. So no, I don't think that you can actually have a good self-nourishment without boundaries. I just don't know that it's possible.
Yeah. So when you don't have self-nourishment, there's obviously stress and like this toxicity in the body that shows up. Where does that show up for you? How does stress present itself in the body for both of you guys?
This is a good question because if anyone's familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an 8 to the core. And a lot for me, and not that is where I live in, but everything really, if somebody hurts my feelings, or if I'm excited, if I'm upset, my body has a reaction. And it could be like, if it could be the smallest things, and it just feels like my body is ready to just like die over the hill. Like, it's very dramatic. But I think with stress, it really shows up in my shoulders, like my whole upper body. Like, and I think if somebody would spend the first 20 minutes just watching me, if I had stress, you would physically see it. To the point where when stress comes up in my body responds in a way of, what are we doing? Are we taking care of this? Are we trying to protect you from something? And it causes more alertness. And so for that, I can't relax. It's hard for me to go to sleep. And like the saying where people like, don't go to sleep when you're angry, like that is for me, because I will wake up and I will feel it again in my body. I'm like, oh, I remember so-and-so just made me so upset. She gonna get it right at 10 o'clock. Like it's almost like my body's like, yes, yeah. It's never ending. And so I feel it because it's an uncomfortable feeling. And so where a lot of other people that I know can process in their head, my body is processing all of my feelings, all of my stress, all of the tension, all of my anger. And for me, it's physical, something to do physical. So like walking, running, something about hitting a pavement when I'm walking just feels like I'm getting something out. Like, okay, this person made me upset. This thing stressed me out. So for me, it shows up within my upper body. And for me to get it out is to really show my body love. So whether it's running, whether it's walking, I'm very big on like spas and massages and, face mats. Like there is something about that whole entire process that just puts me in a whole mood. And I could just feel like my body's like, okay, we are taking care, like she's taking care of us. And so we can like calm down. And when the flip side of that is if I don't take care of it, then there is a reaction that's coming out and I'm projecting on other people. So I could be speaking and I could feel my hands getting in somebody's face. I could feel like my neck moving or catching, like my voice raising, catching the attitude, my facial expressions where people are like, what did we do? We just asked you a question. You're ready to fight. So there's a way that I've kind of recognized a lot of things like, oh, I don't want my body to feel this. I want to be able to like sleep at night. And I don't want to go to the chiropractor next week because I got a knot in my neck now and they don't know how to get it out. So like those types of things, I'm very aware. And I'm also aware of what my body needs to really calm down and to let go of that stress.
Yeah. And I really want to make a point to the fact that when stress is in your body, this is what it really is breaking down for you. You identify it and you are attentive to handling it. And that in and of itself is a boundary. That means you stop all other things.
Right.
You're not doing anything else, but you're going to be attentive to caring for the physical manifestation of stress in your life.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of times what I see with, stressed out executives or social workers is that their pace is so fast that they identify it, but they don't attend to it until there's a break, until there's something that becomes so intolerable. So I really think that your ritual and your habit of saying like, this needs tending to, and no, I'm not going to go to that next meeting and I'm not going to do this next thing without tending to this, whatever the cost might be.
And it's important to communicate that too. So, I communicate very openly with my supervisor, just like, hey, that department meeting just pissed me off. So I just need a good 20 minutes. Like I just need 10 minutes to get myself together. So even with my friends, like there's no harm in communicating that. There's no harm in saying like, I just need a 10-minute breather. Do not talk to me. Don't ask me what's wrong. I will come to you. I need you to know that I need 10 minutes of just silence with myself and with Jesus before I pop off on somebody. And some people can't do that. Like, it's sad. Like, we live in a culture where people are just like, well, I'm just going to push through. No, me pushing through is me snapping on somebody. And so it's important to communicate where, where these triggers are coming from or when people are doing that. Because some folks, common sense ain't common for everybody. So you gotta spell it out for some people. But you gotta communicate when that is coming up in your life, in your body, mentally, communication is so huge and and I would think really could handle a lot of issues when stress comes into the picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love the fact that you were just like talking about taking a time out, because that's one of the things that I have to teach my married couples, like the people who are partners and living in spaces, and they're just chaotic so much of the time, and there's arguing all the time. And sometimes I have to make them take a time out in session. And it's so good when people can learn, you know what? I really want to yell. I really want to yell. I really want to scream. That's what my internal world is saying. And it would feel so much better if I did. And that's when they get themselves in trouble, because they say things they don't mean, or they say things that they meant in the moment, but then later they're like, oh God, that was awful. But it releases the pressure cooker valve. That's what I always think of. Like, sometimes our lives are like a pressure cooker, and you have to let the steam off. You have to open the vent. You know what I mean? At some point you have to. But you don't want your partner or your friends or your coworkers to get burnt by the steam. So you need to take yourself somewhere else. Like you were saying, you need to take yourself somewhere else and do that for however long it takes, so that, you're not still pressure cooking, so that you can actually have a gentle, genuine conversation with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Joy, do you want to comment on how it shows up for you, and if you do you go the handle route and attend to it, or do you have those moments of like push through?
I think there are times when like life requires that you push through. And it's not because I don't want to go handle it, but it's just because like there are times when life requires that you push through. I think the key is, one, sometimes I push through and I don't know that I set myself up poorly. You know what I mean? Like if I created a lunch meeting and now it's a busy day and I didn't get a break. Well, that was stupid. I'm not doing that again. Right? Like those are the things that I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I learned, next time. And by the end of the day, I'm busted and I'm tired and I don't want to talk to anybody. And okay, fine. You know what I mean? So I think there are times when you have to push through just because you did this to yourself. So you know what? Deal. Like when you get a chance, then you can tend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like push through, never tend. It's eventually I'm going to tend to myself because my body will require it, because I'm not necessarily like Jovanie. I think I spin in my head really, really well. Like it's just, there are conversations up there and worries happening. And like, there's a million little people just hanging out in my brain most of the time. And then it shows up because I start wearing my shoulders as earrings. You know what I mean? And I get headaches and I feel tension, and that's when I get short with people, and I don't. And usually one of my kids, actually, what's really funny is one of my kids will be like, you having a bad day? And I'll be like, oh, yep, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to go. Give me a minute. I'll be right back. You know what I mean? And so sometimes I notice it, and sometimes I'm really good about being like, oh, you're spinning out. What needs to happen? What do you need to do? I feel as though my self-nourishment practice around like body care is pretty decent. Like I work out daily, because for a long time when I wasn't, there was this part of my brain, all of my brain lived on overdrive. It's something about exercise and working out, not killing myself. I'm not like, doing an hour a day. I'm just doing like 20 to 30 minutes a day, but that in and of itself helps sort of clean the slate and move me towards a healthier version of me. So
yeah, that's good. The mental clarity, like cleaning out, that is so true after working out. Like maybe that's what you're talking about, Jovanie, too, about when you're walking your feet, there's some kind of like meditative cleanse that helps you when you're moving. And that's really true. That happens for me too. So we had talked about this, like just in other conversations, about how there are like mental, emotional, physical, spiritual boundaries. Like you can have boundaries with people, you can have boundaries with technology, you can have boundaries, with work, and all like those different types of categories. There's not just like, all right, this one thing stresses me out, I need to put a boundary up in my relationship. So when you're thinking about all the different types of boundaries, I want to think about relationships though, first for a second, about when your relationships are something that is impacting what we have talked about as your peace, and bringing peace to you in your life, and maybe not serving you in a way. We have this tendency to allow certain behaviors to continue without either confronting them or putting a boundary up for them, because we're afraid of what that might mean. So what exactly, I mean, we hear it all the time. So Joy, why don't you go ahead and start first and tell me what you think protecting your peace means.
Usually I'm more aware of when there's not inner alignment than when I have it. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I think most people get it. Like when you're aggravated and upset and something feels off and you're replaying a conversation in your head over and over and over again, that means my peace is off. Something's not okay in here internally. And so oftentimes that means that I then have to do something outside of myself to bring myself back into inner alignment and inner peace. And that's the hard work. Like, that's the part where I have to be brave enough to say to the person who might have offended me, or, you know, confront someone who ran over one of my boundaries. That wasn't okay. And I need it to be different next time. And I'm still learning how to do that. I'm not great at it. But I'm still learning. I think it's the hardest thing about being a human. Honestly, I do. I think because everybody wants to. Brittany, you said this to me one time, and I thought that's so good. I genuinely believe at the core of most people, they believe that they're good. And I think that they are good. I think the majority of us are good. But when we allow this stuff to go on inside of ourselves, then that person becomes a villain and has all bad motives and doesn't have anything good about them. But then if I'm transparent and I'm vulnerable and I say how I feel and I talk about what happened and I talk about my experience and I don't blame, but I say, that hurt my feelings. One, it's vulnerable, which vulnerability is always a gift. It's always a gift to somebody. And it gives that person a chance to, one, meet a need that maybe you didn't know you had, and now you know you have it. And so you're trying to get it back from them. Does that make sense? Like, if I need an apology, it's a chance for me to say, I need us to fix this. Can we fix this somehow and have it be different in the future? And so I think for me, that's the difference between inner peace and a boundary. Is my inner peace gets messed up when somebody triggered me, really, in the long run. That's, you know, and maybe it's one of my baby wounds, like one of my inner child gets all triggered because she's now worried that she's going to be abandoned. And so I got to go deal with her first and talk to her and say, what is it you need? And then I got to communicate that to whoever, not because that's their need. That I don't expect everybody to always meet all of my needs. That's not the thing. I got to meet my own needs. But at the same time, I should at least be willing to say to somebody, this was my experience during our recent conversation. And give them a chance to clarify and bring about the inner peace that I'm needing. Wasn't that clear? I hope that was clear.
That was good.
Okay.
That was good.
That made sense. And I think it makes sense to the point of, like, you know, sometimes you can put up such a firm boundary that it never gives anybody the chance to emotionally grow in a different direction. And you see that a lot. Like, I'm cutting this person off. We're not having this conversation. And I'm quitting every job that is hard because this person said something wrong to me. And we never try, you know? But there's also a point in that balance where we can't let somebody transgress our boundaries regularly without doing something, because then we will lose our self-nourishment.
There's a therapist, a pretty renowned therapist, and I think I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I think it was Bowen, who talks about when you cut people off, they're actually closer to you than they were when you were enmeshed. We're so caught up in one another. You were close. It was like too much. So you end up cutting that person off. But then when you cut them off, you're actually closer, which is an interesting sort of theory. But you spend a whole lot of your time thinking about how that person did you wrong, how that person, they end up embodying you. They end up in here and in here, you know? And so I agree, like, your boundaries shouldn't be like this. They shouldn't be rigid. They should be like a cell of a body, which has a border, but it lets things in and it lets things out.
What do you think, Joe? What is protecting your peace to you?
You know, it's interesting because, you know, if you were to like put this on Twitter or Instagram or something, everybody would, like, I feel like majority of our culture would be like, protecting our peace equals cutting you off. It equals, you know, me trying to prove that my life is much better. So I'm gonna let you follow me, but I'm not following you. but I'm going to make sure you know that I'm living well. And it's like, is that protecting your peace? I feel like my peace is disturbed a bit. But for me, this is so much of like, I live and breathe protecting my peace, and not only relationally, emotionally within my job. And it's really setting these boundaries with people of just like, and even not only with people, even with like, it could even be with like around certain like conversations, right? And so I've had to tell a couple of friends of mine, I'm like, hey, I don't want to know about so-and-so, because one, it drains me. Like there is something that as soon as you start talking about like, oh, you heard about so-and-so, like there's something that in my brain, they're like, oh girl, here we go. We tied. So for me, protecting my peace is really giving a lot of grace to folks who are interacting with me. And I know the individual that I am. Like my dad has always said this, and my mom, like they both always said this. They're like, people feel like they know you because of how you make them feel, and they want like you make them feel like they are a part of your world, or like they are important, which is great. And with that, I've had to really kind of create these boundaries with folks of just like, you may not know everything about me. That is protecting my peace. It doesn't mean that you're not important. It doesn't mean that I can't share my life with you. There is just, I've noticed some of the implications off of what people may have said. Even with technology, like last year I deactivated my Twitter account because I was so toxic on that platform. Completely toxic. Probably no one will probably say that. I was so toxic on that platform. And a part of protecting my peace, right? A part of my protecting my own peace is protecting a lot of my integrity and character, that people who know me are looking at a Twitter and they're like, this ain't the same person we engaging with. So that is also a lot of like my protection of my own peace, of just like, I don't need to go head to head with folks. I don't need to feel like I have to have the end all say all. I don't need to make a big statement, like those in just little in and out things. And also loving people well and having grace, because I do think that we live in such a culture that's like, cut off, I don't want to talk to you, you hurt me. But also protecting my peace is going to therapy and really working through, a lot of it is working through childhood things that just came up, and stuff that I'm just like, well, why am I bumping up against this because of X, Y, and Z? Like, why do I feel like I want people to like me? Like, I agree with Joy. Like, I think we always want to feel like we are good people. And for me, college was big for me in that, where I wanted to make sure that people knew I was good. And I wanted people to know that I was like, if I did something, I was apologizing. I wouldn't even let them explain, like, hey, I'm sorry, because I was wrong. And I'll be taking ownership for stuff that I'm like, I didn't even know this happened. So a lot of it is really doing your inner work. Like, protecting your peace is really doing the inner work, and like really working in and coming face to face with this child of just like, okay, this is a little tense for both of us, but I'm going to meet you where you at, and we're going to work out something. We're going to go step by step and work out some things. And some of it is like, I do fail at times. Like, there's moments where people just get me to it. Like I have a good friend, love her dearly. She'll just start complaining about stuff. I was like, well, you don't see your life, girl. We out here living our best lives. We're young. Like, I'll just start getting in. I was like, I can't. Like, I'll stop. I was like, I can't convince you why you should be, not grateful, but why you should like love where you're at or the season that you're at. And I have noticed, I was like, this is disturbing my peace, because in part for me, it's like, I'm looking at my life. I was like, well, we're in the same boat. Like, why you want to jump off the boat? We're having a good time. Like, why are you stressed? I'm having, it's like, and it's not my responsibility. So a lot of, for me, protecting my peace is not owning people's decisions and their actions. Also, like, doing my own therapy and my own work, and really putting hard boundaries on people around me. And especially people who have always had access to me. That is a big deal for, I know a lot of people in different contexts and a lot of people who've had access to me. And I find myself in my life now where folks don't have access to me anymore, or they don't know they don't know what's going on. They've been used to see me all the time, but now they're just like, well, she posts a little thing on Facebook, but what is she doing in her life? Like, so there's a lot of like, it's okay, but also the club is closed, y'all. Like, we're done.
Right.
So,
like they're owed that. They're owed access to you.
yeah.
And I wish somebody when I was like 20 told me that I could not control other people's behavior. I mean, oof, I cannot control other people and their world. I can control myself, you know? And what I think is interesting is like this idea of protecting your peace, self-nourishment, and the boundaries. Like we eat this up because it has saved us. But we might have somebody listening out there saying, is this selfish? We might have asked ourselves that at some point. Is behaving in these certain ways where like we put some space in between certain things, putting a boundary up, choosing to take time for yourself versus give any more to somebody else. Is it selfish?
No. I think the majority of the time people don't think self-care, self-nourishment is selfish until about other people. I could be wrong. I've never been told I was selfish for doing self-care or self-nourishment. What I have encountered within myself is when someone disturbs my inner peace or crosses over a boundary, then I struggle with some shame and some guilt. And I think that's the piece for me that is hard, because then I have to sit with, well, wait, should I feel shame and guilt? Is this, because if you were my client, if I was my client, I'd be like, girl, that's fine. You're allowed to stand up for yourself. You're allowed to speak up. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed.
Absolutely.
But then when it's my turn, it's so hard.
Yeah.
So hard to be able to stand up for myself and to say what I need and to actually just kind of go, no, that's not okay. I can't do that. I can't, because I have grown up as a human giver. I have been raised as a human giver, as a person that is only worthwhile if she's meeting other people's needs. And that's the piece I think. I don't think any sort of self-nourishment or self-care is selfish. In fact, I think it's more selfless than selfish, just because I know that my inner peace and my good boundaries are better for the people in my life. And I think I said that the last time we chatted, like, you can call it selfish all you want, but at the same time, I know that I'm happier, I'm kinder, I'm nicer, I'm more generous, I'm more willing, I'm less angry when I'm doing a good job with my peace and with my boundaries.
Absolutely.
And I think that there are women in the world, I don't know about men so much, but I think that there are women in the world who, when I talk to them about self-nourishment, their back automatically goes up and they're like, I don't have time. I can't. Because of what I just said, they would feel guilty and feel some shame because they weren't doing all the things that women are supposed to do in this world. And I think that it's especially true for younger women. I know I felt it the most. The hardest section of my life was when I had babies. Oh, those things, they take everything from you. Like you no longer belong to yourself. Your whole body just belongs to somebody else all the time, especially if you're a nursing mom. Like, you don't even get a say over when things come out. I mean, for goodness sake, you know what I mean? Like, there's just stuff everywhere all the time. And like, who's got time for a nap? Who's got time for whatever? So most of the time it's young moms. And I wish if I could give a young mom anything, it would be you do what you can when you can, and you have grace for the rest.
Mm.
So.
Yeah, I would say that I would not throw out self-care, the term in and of itself. It's not one or the other. They exist together, self-care and self-nourishment. And it reminded me of what I was thinking when you were talking, is that I think that care is a mental, emotional headspace. Mm-hmm. The amount of tenderness and care that we give out to other people, we have to give to ourselves. The way we encourage and are kind and are good to other people, we have to give that care to ourselves, and that grace. And so I see the same thing with my clients, that they don't think other people are selfish. They cannot give themselves grace and care and tenderness and nurturing. Nourishment kicks in because you have food and water metaphors. This is a sustaining thing that I must do. But I can live without being kind to myself because that's intolerable.
Right.
And I really feel like it's important to make that distinction mentally and emotionally about why care and tenderness is super important. And it's not a selfish act. But Joe, you also had like a strong reaction when I said, is this selfish? You were like, no.
No, it's not. And I think because I used to think that way. Like, I remember, I think I may have been like 25, 26. Well, it was right after college and having like my first real job, whatever. And I was grinding. Like, when I think about it, I was like, I almost want to go back in time and be like, girl, it's okay. Like, stop it. Because this don't go nowhere. Like, I almost wish I could go back and tell myself, like, why, like, I was grinding so hard. Like, I wasn't, and I was still working in like youth and young adults, and was still like, I was still a baby at that time, and still trying to figure out rhythms, still trying to figure out bills. And I was living in a different state. My whole family was in Florida still. I was in a whole nother state. And I just did not have grace for myself. I really operated in this way of like, I spent 4 years at school and I needed to like immediately level up. Like, there was no time for like learning what I wanted to do. I just needed to get to a certain status in a career. And I burned myself out bad. Like, I remember I had a mental breakdown in my office. And it was just like, after like somebody was waiting for me to take them home, and they're like, Miss JoJo. I was like, don't look at me. I'll come back. Like, I'll come back. They're like, okay. And I just remember just like having like a slight panic attack, because I'm like, I can't sleep. I'm tired. I'm sure that I'm not eating well. I have this high expectation for myself. I think I know the expectations that my supervisors want for me, that they haven't even said that, or I'm just projecting. I want to prove to my parents that this was not a mistake. Like, there was just so many layers. And it really took a couple, like, I like was like just hyperventilating over the phone, and they just sent me money. They're like, do whatever you want, like, go have fun, go do your thing, like, go buy a meal for yourself, like, go get a meal and just learn how to, like, you need to turn your brain off. And for the longest, I thought it was selfish. Like, I just thought it was so selfish of just the fact of like, well, like, I have all these teens that are looking up to me, and I have to do this, and I have a million things like that, and my day off is on Friday and it's only Tuesday. Like, there was so much, like, a mixture of like me feeling this guilt and shame, even through the process of that. And I think it wasn't until I got into like my second year into that role, and then when I transitioned out, that I just was like, no, we're not doing this. We weren't doing it. And I had talked to a couple of friends that they were kind of doing the same thing. And so we kind of had this vow to ourselves, like, we cannot do this in our 20s. Like, we don't want to look back in our 20s. We're like, we were just stressed. We were stressed. I regretted stuff. Like, there's like, we just did not want to have this idea of what we thought. And so I think for me, coming out of that, I just promised myself, was like, no matter how busy the season is, no matter what it is, who needs me, like, I'm taking myself on a date. We're taking like a full day. Like, we're putting our phone away. We're just, we're putting like, and it started with people texting or calling me past 4:30, 5 o'clock. What a concept. And so like it started off with that, like, hey, I'll hit you up tomorrow about that. Like, I ain't got it. And it started breaking down this whole thing of like, it's not guilt, it's not shame. It's just hard. Like, it's hard. You want to prove yourself to people, but I just could not let myself get to that place. But then I started seeing people who were much older than me, who had no boundaries and they were like, in marriages, they had kids, they had no boundaries, they had no self-nourishment. And I just felt so like, I felt like I was just like, if this is my example, I don't want to be this. Like, I don't want to get to a place where I'm like, I don't want to be y'all. And it was such a weird, like, out of body experience. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why you don't have boundaries? Like, go home. Don't you got your kids? Like, why are you here still? So that, like, it was just that was a hard revelation. I think that's why for me, I like working with college students and young adults is like, and it's hard because they have such a different, like, they're working with something completely different than when I was in college. And I just had to like, just explain to them like, have you had a break? Like, I know you got an exam, but like, have you got a break? Have you breathed? Like, have you been outside? Like, you've been in this library. Like, have you been outside? Because it's gorgeous. And so just being very direct, like, you will mentally and emotionally die. And it sounds so harsh, but it's just like, you'll just get to a place where you're going to look back and like, what did I do all of that for? Because it didn't, like, I drained myself. And so I think that experience for me, that one experience just like took me out. And I just kind of made this promise to myself, like, never again, girl.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to make a note of the fact that what elicited the changes was a panic attack.
Yeah.
I had a breaking point. And I teach this burnout resilience class, and I hear from a lot of people, so are you telling me that if I don't slow down, I don't stop, I'm going to like die?
Yeah.
I mean, the science is there.
Yeah.
You are not a machine. You cannot run into the ground. You had a panic attack and things had to change.
Yeah.
And that's what when we know when we're protecting our peace, we know when we're not. But my follow-up to that is, for both of you, as far as like protecting your peace and what was going on in our 20s, we both kind of mentioned that this was like a high stress, high risk, low reward.
Yeah.
Was the pressure to be that, like, successful and driven and go above and beyond and go, was that pressure put on yourself, or was that coming from leaders, family, culture? Where is the pressure to crush yourself into success?
I think it comes from everywhere. In my experience, it certainly came from, growing up, not just in a family, but in an organization that like constantly sent the message of, you have to die to yourself. You have to die to yourself. You have to die to yourself. You know what I mean? And then you watch your parents go, 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 go. You know what I mean? And they have to achieve, and they have to achieve, and they have to achieve. And so you're watching that. So that's the mirror that you're given. That was for me. That was what happened. But then, I graduated from college and I got a job, and it was a great, like, at first I thought this was wonderful. This is amazing. I love this. But I was also creating something new. Number one, they had no business giving a 22-year-old just out of college a job that nobody had done before, and that nobody the blueprint for, and that nobody, like, what? And nobody was holding my hand. Nobody was helping me along. There wasn't any encouragement. There was only like, where are the results? Where are the results? Because that's the type of organization that I was in, is like, just you have to create results. What are the results? What are the results? And like, I was just like, I don't know how to, I don't know. What do I do? So it was like institutional. It was like a story of, you know, family. And I don't think that, you know, I think everybody does that whole, like, my parents weren't bad parents. I had a great childhood, but my parents were driven people, you know what I mean? Because, and I think part of that is because what the system put on them, you know what I mean? What their childhoods. So I think it just comes from everywhere. It comes from peers, like wanting to be something, make a name for themselves, you know, do X, Y, and Z, leave a legacy, whatever it is, you know, and, so yeah, I think that's it. I think it can.
Yeah, it's a mixture of everything. I think, like, for my parents, you know, my parents are Haitians. And so I think there's something like watching their lives and hearing what they've gone through, and not a way of being like, oh, we went through this, so you need to do better, but like, you just see your family in a different light. And I think for me, there's something that just clicked in my brain of just like, ooh, I gotta make you proud. They've never said it. Like, me graduating high school was like, praise God, we got her through something. Like, we got her through something. So, like, I think there was something for me is like, oh, I don't want them to feel like they came to this country and like their child could not, like, they've given everything and their child couldn't succeed, right? And they've never communicated that to me. Now, there's some things culturally where, you know, like, of course, like, culturally, there's things like, okay, please. But I think the bigger thing was like a lot of things that in my own brain that I was just kind of having inner dialogue and like, well, we got to succeed. We got to do this. We got to do that, blah, blah, blah. We got to keep moving. We got to keep pushing. But then also, as you know, I think also with just like, you know, you work with certain people who have different vision and a different drive. And also there's something about, specifically like in your 20s, where I don't care what no one say, in your 20s, you just want to make a name for yourself. So there are a lot of like, you hear stuff, you hear how people moving, you see what people are doing. And for the longest, it feels like there's everything coming at you. And I think that's what happened. It's, you know, it's the pressure of the job. It's the pressure you put on yourself. It's the pressure from leaders, and it's the pressure from like your own peers. It's you know, it's things that you're like, somebody should have onboarded me well, but now I got to figure out how to do it myself. And if I fail, then they're gonna be like, well, she couldn't do the job. Like, so it's like all these different things that you're just like, oh, like, you are a pressure cooker, right? And so yeah, it's hard. And I think it was interesting because I had a friend who shared with me, she's just like, oh, if I were to like take a picture of 20-year-old Joe and 30-something-year-old Joe, like, y'all are both succeeding, but one is just so much healthier. Like, you just don't, she's like, you just don't care about what people think and what they say. Like, you barely be telling people what you be doing. I say, yeah, that's true. I barely be like, and I couldn't say that when I was 20. Like, I really cared about what people thought. I really cared about if my name was going to be in certain rooms, what were they saying? Like, if people had a problem with me, I would go to the ends of the earth to put pressure on myself to prove that person wrong. Like, would prove them wrong it didn't matter if they liked me. I'm like, I'm gonna prove you wrong anyways. You can not like me, but I'm gonna make sure you're gonna be like, okay, I don't like her, but she at least did her work. So it's a mixture of everything. And I think as a leader, for someone who is overseeing people, I'm very aware of what pressure I'm putting on people who are reporting to me subconsciously, and what I'm saying. And I just like, and because I have 20-something-year-olds, you know, that I work with a lot, and I'm like, let me not say something, and you be like, well, I was talking to Joe, like, you, no, man. So I'm more aware of like, I want to be a great leader, but I want to lead you well, and I don't want you to feel like there is pressure. And so what space do I take up for you to feel like you can fully show up as yourself, make mistakes, and still grow in whatever capacity you need to grow in?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and what I hear there is that it comes out of a cost. Like in our 20s, we all seem to embody this frenetic energy of like pressure cooker and have to succeed because what are other people going to think? And it's if you let go of that, it comes at a cost, right? Then you just let people think something about you. And then maybe you don't get that job that's going to crush you even further, you know? But some people say that if I slow down, then I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss an opportunity. I won't be able to climb the ladder. I won't be able to get that job or this job, or I won't be in relationship with this person or that person. But the cost sounds like it's worth it. Right? And eventually, like there's plenty of people who are very, very successful, who have got this down. Like they know how to nourish themselves. They take really good care of themselves. So the cost is worth letting go of the right thing, letting go of the right thing.
Yeah.
Because then, or the wrong thing, and then you would get the right thing later on because you're honoring yourself.
Yeah.
In a way. So
I think that's where success comes. Mm-hmm. When you honor yourself and you feed that part of you, that's where the most joy comes and the fruit comes. And that's where and so that's where it feels like success. And at that point, when you're like, oh yeah, this is great, then it feels successful, whether you're a CEO or a stay-at-home mom or something in between. It's like, no, this is absolutely everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter the title or what anybody else has given you. It's just like, oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't help but think that the 20-year-olds that are in your care, Joe, are very lucky. Oh man, they're so lucky. I think that this was such a good conversation. We should wrap up here, but in the interest of, I think this might be turned into like a part 2, because we could talk about this piece forever. I really don't want to let this comment slide from you, Joy, and about how you were taught to die to yourself. So this is of the Christian religion. It's a scripture for anybody who's not adhering to that religion. It's scripture that's often taken out of context in the whole Bible, used to justify things that are not accurate. And I think that a conversation that I just want to touch on and comment on is that a lot of the time, whether it's an organization, organized religion, a church, or a nonprofit, it's that it's the manifestation of an angry disciplinary God. You need to work harder. You need to earn more. You need to give me more. But the story of Jesus embodies God as a companion and God that rested. And in the middle of the storm, his people are like, what's going on? And he's sleeping. So I think that spiritually speaking, when we think about spiritual boundaries and spiritually speaking of self-nourishment, religion can be your greatest resource and greatest encouragement, or it can be something incredibly traumatic.
Yeah. It can definitely be used as a weapon.
Right. So do you guys want to just comment on that twofold tension and dynamic that a lot of people face?
We don't know how to love people well the way that Jesus loves people. I mean, whether we say we love Jesus or not, like, we don't know how to love people well the way that Jesus say that we love people. I think that there is an entitlement when it comes to scripture and knowing scripture, and specifically like people, like my job sits in ministry, right? And there's a sort of an entitlement of like, I know what's best, and so you need to adhere to this. And I don't think we know how to care for people's souls in that. And because of that, unfortunately, people are hurt. Like, people are severely hurt. People are severely traumatized. But the flip side is that when you have individuals, leaders, pastors, like who know how to like love with like deeply and intentionally and know how to care for your soul and bring and also surround you with people who feel the same, and able to carry you as a community, there's something beautiful in that, right? There's something beautiful, there's goodness that come out of that. But I find myself sometimes always like, although it's not like I didn't do nothing, but just like apologizing on behalf. I was like, I'm sorry, Christian folk. Well, I said we ain't got no sense. I'm so sorry. We ain't got no sense. We ain't got no sense, babes. I'm so sorry. Like we hood rats. That's what we are. We ain't got no sense. Like I have to be able to, like I have to apologize to folks because I'm like telling you this. Like we ain't no better, babes. We're no better. So like that for me is like, yeah, we don't know how to love people well the way that Jesus says to love them. I think we hold a lot of our own hurt and a lot of our own anger with whatever tension we're feeling in our own spiritual walk, and we don't know when we're projecting on people. And it's like, oh, you need to die to yourself. Well, are you okay? Who told you that? Because you over here projecting on folks, and I don't like that. Like,
that's true.
So I think that's the biggest thing. Is like we just don't know how to love people well, the way that the Lord says how we love them. I think we think we know best, and we don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whew. Joy, any added to anything, or did she say it? She said it.
That was a whole mic drop. Like I totally agree. I think when we focus, like you were talking about, like there's a whole Bible and people just choose this one verse, and it's so unhealthy. It's taking it all out of context, because I don't think that we weren't called to live small lives. We weren't created to be tiny people who get to be told by somebody else, die to yourself, when I don't know that. Well, what's that look like for you? You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think everything that Jovanie said was absolutely accurate. And I think there's so much spiritual trauma happening in the world right now. I don't know about other religions, but I know that in the Christian, evangelical Christian Western world, there is so much spiritual trauma happening, and it's gross. And I think that's why a lot of people are finding, God in other places. And I applaud that. I applaud that. If you need to leave in order to find who he is for you, you know what I mean? Who he is fully, this abundant life that he promised us, like that's part of scripture too. And why isn't anybody saying that to anybody? Live an abundant life. Why isn't anybody going like that? You know what I mean? Like, so I think everything Joe said was perfect and right on. And we should have just ended with her. I just rambled.
Well, you're in luck, because there's some podcast editing machine that people use. A machine. Oh man. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, because I feel like these conversations need to happen outside of our living room, because I think your journey can contribute so much to other people. So I love you guys.
We love you.